Hi, I'm Georgie Dickens, host of Stratospheric Leaders, the podcast where I get to have inspired conversations with extraordinary leaders from across capital markets. Join me to hear their game-changing strategies, the personal stories, and powerful sound bites behind their stratospheric success. Every episode packed with wisdom, insight, and real-world lessons, the stuff they simply don't teach you in business school. If you want to elevate your game and most importantly, elevate those around you, this podcast is for you. I was delighted to welcome the wonderful Doug Cifu to an episode of Stratospheric Leaders. And what an enjoyable conversation we had. There were many laugh out loud moments for me. And what struck me was how real this conversation felt. And I imagine that whether you meet Doug in the boardroom or equally if you bump into him in a restaurant, he's exactly the same, which is he's warm, he's charming, he's funny, and he's a serious business person, but refreshingly, he doesn't take himself too seriously. And when we talked about the world of work, it all started from an early age for him. Eager to make his own money, he started off cutting grass, and then in his teenage years, he became a golf caddy. And like many of us that have had jobs in our youth, there are so many valuable lessons that feed into our leadership. And for him as a caddy, he learned how to treat people, how to treat them with respect, and how to connect with people across all walks of life. Post high school, he went on to Columbia to study law. And this is where his mother said to him, Dougie, you're either going to make a lot of money or you're going to get yourself into trouble. Fortunately, he chose the former path. Doug was a successful lawyer for many years before he joined forces with Vinnie Viola, and they founded Virtu. And this is a company which specializes in high frequency trading and market making across a wide range of asset classes. And I was really curious around why did you name the company Virtu? It was after the word virtuous, because everything they do, he said, we want it to be virtuous. There's no gray, it's black and white, and we're always going to be on the good side of white. Now in 2025, Doug has been with the company for 17 years. He's the CEO with a market cap of around $6 billion. And having worked with the organization, I can confidently say it's a firm with some of the very best people in the industry. It's a great episode with some exceptional leadership lessons and also some genuinely brilliant personal insights. I trust you're going to enjoy this episode as much as I did recording it. Doug, I am delighted to welcome you to Stratospheric Leaders. In fact, I'm thrilled to welcome you to your episode of Stratospheric Leaders. You and I first met at a Christmas lunch several years ago, and I remember it vividly because it was during this brief window between COVID lockdowns where we were able to gather in person before everything shut down again. So I think not only did we share Christmas cheer amongst the group, but also a few microbes. But since then, I've had the privilege of working with the Virtuians, and you have such an extraordinary group of people working at Virtu. As part of one of the programs I ran last year, you and I did a fireside chat. And as I shared with you at the time, it was packed with such powerful lessons, rich insights, and so much humor. We talked everything from markets to hip flexes, your daughter calling you cheap. We talked about sweater vests. I mean, we covered a whole range of topics. And the conversation really left a lasting impression on me. So I have very much been looking forward to our podcast recording. And so I would love to, I always do my prep and we know each other really well, but I was Googling you and there's all about the Florida Panthers, there's Virtu, but yeah, again, you're a private person as well. So I was going to ask, well, not going to ask, I'm going to ask if I was to Google search you, what's one thing I wouldn't find out? What's a lesser known fact that people wouldn't know about you?
Wow, that's a great one. I would say, and my wife would disagree with that I actually think I'm a terrific dancer. Which is, and my wife actually, yeah, it's one of those things where like, she says you're a great dancer, but you're all about yourself. So like I like just having fun. So she's like, I'm like an afterthought. In fact, one of the, so I've been married for 25, almost 26 years. And when we first started dating, we go to this wedding. It's at the Metropolitan Club. I don't know why I'm telling you this story, but it's like a funny dance story. And this is like, we'd been dating maybe like 3, 4, 5 months. And it was like her best friend was getting married and she's in the wedding party and she's kind of rolling me out. And it was like a big Jewish wedding. I'm not Jewish. And she was concerned, blah, 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 all the nonsense and BS that people worry about. My wife used to worry about. So she's like, don't drink that much. And I was like, all right, that's like putting like meat in front of a dog. Don't ever tell me not to do anything. Long story short, she goes off with the wedding party. She comes back. I don't really remember this that well. And I was hammered and I was kind of like, I'll say dirty dancing. It wasn't like inappropriate with the groom's mother, Mrs. Miller. And she was like, what in the, so that was literally the only fight we ever had because she was like, what are you doing? And she tried to cut me off from drinking. Long story short, she got over it, and we're still married 27 years later, I guess. So there you go.
So she did marry you. So I love the fact you like having fun. And I'm sure that is a golden thread that's run through your life.
Yeah, like I don't want to say I don't take myself seriously because I do serious kind of business things, I guess, but like I kind of am who I am. I just figured out a long time ago. I don't know, it probably was my upbringing. I had a fantastic mother. I'm not just saying this because you're a great mother because I've met your children. It's 98% the mother, right? And so I had a great mother, 2%, the guys, you got to be there, provide, kind of keep the kids in the fairway a little bit, but the mother's doing everything in the fairway. I'm a golfer, so I use golf analogies. And so I kind of figured a long time ago when I started business, like I've always had like kind of a personality, if you will. And so I was like, I can't really change who I am. I just can't. I'm not a great ass kisser. I'm not a good, I have a hard time being super phony. And it was hard. So like I started as a lawyer, and I was like, all right, if I'm skilled and people, most people like me, some people can't stand me, and at the end of the day you just can't worry about it. You got to control what you control. So I don't really worry about like what the world thinks of me, if you will, and I just want to like live every day and be happy, and you know run my little firm and go to hockey games and be happy, and hopefully play like some nice golf with friends, and that kind of stuff. Just keep it simple.
I love, and what you said there about personality, because I think as leaders ascend, like IQ is table stakes. It is about personality.
Yeah.
We're in the business of people. You want to engage people,
Yeah.
and equally, you want to have fun in life. Like life is the journey.
Yeah, it really is. And I really actually like people. I like meeting different people. I mean, that's like one of the best things about the job I've had for the last 17 years, like starting and running this little firm called Virtu Financial. Is it's first of all the colleagues and friends and partners I've had over the years, and do still have at Virtu, and watching them grow. And like, Cindy, who you know very well, our CFO, she started when she was like, this big and 12 years old, and kind of a sheepish, like, junior accountant. And now she's the CFO of this public company. That's pretty cool. And like, people from different cultures, different places. I love when I take an Uber. I always talk to the Uber drivers, like, and I ask them where they're from. And we talk about like Kazakhstan or like Georgia, the country, not the state, and I learn like a lot about different people and their backgrounds and like, whatnot. I just think it's like kind of part of the joy of life.
Yeah, I remember a leader once said to me, "Be interested and be interesting." And
Yeah.
that "be interested," he said, it sets you apart when you're curious about others. You want to learn.
Yeah. And I'm saying this, and I'm not trying to be like, the everyman guy, but like, frankly, I've had much more interesting conversations with like caddies and people working in my house, or like landscapers. I used to be a landscaper when I was a kid, or Uber drivers, than I have like really uptight businessmen and billionaires who like just bore the shit out of me. Like I don't have like a ton of like the master of the universe kind of friends. I never got that. Like these guys like seem to like all socialize with each other. It's like they're not that fucking interesting. Oh, sorry, Chris. They're just not
No,
that
no, we can
interesting.
swear.
Yeah, and like everyone's like, oh, I got this house in the Hamptons. I'm on the board of this. It's just like, ah, forget it. I don't want to do any of that crap.
Keeping it real. And look,
Yeah,
you mentioned 17 years at Virtue, and I know you were in law before that, but I want to rewind even before that.
yeah.
The young Doug Cifu, what was his first ever job?
Well, it's a great question. I had I was self-employed first. Depends what you ask. So like I was always fascinated by money because we didn't have a ton growing up. I grew up very comfortable. My dad was a electrical engineer. My mother was a nurse that worked at night. So like two salary home, and but they had to put three boys through college and then graduate school and pay for all that kind of stuff. And that wasn't really that easy in the 1970s and the early 1980s. And I had two brothers that went to college and graduate school, and they paid for everything. I never had any student loans, right? So like I was always very eager to like make my own money and have my own money. So I started literally, I used to have to, I loved cutting grass, and like I'm an Italian. So Italians love landscaping and stonework. I was shitty with stonework. So I gravitated towards landscaping. I still to this day, like I love trimming bushes and cutting, cutting trees. I'll tell you a really funny story. When I meander and I'll come back. I apologize. When I first moved out to Short Hills, New Jersey, we moved to this like really fancy house, like this great house. I was a lawyer, and I didn't know any better. We never had a landscaper, and no one ever did anything. We were kids. We did everything ourselves. My father had three boys that he had built in help. So we get to the house, and it was a little overgrown. So I get like a tree saw and all this other stuff. I know how to do this stuff. So I'm in the front yard, like literally trimming trees, cutting the grass, and then all this stuff, like making it nice because it was my house. I'm proud of it. And my neighbor across the street, I hadn't met him, and I was probably dressed like an animal, like a slob, like I always am on weekends, and I was all full of stuff. So the neighbor pulls in, and I wait. I go, "Hey, how are you?" And the guy looks at me and goes, runs in the house because he thought I was the landscaper. What I learned is when you move to suburbia, you don't do any of your own stuff anymore. So anyhow, I digress. Now, 25 years later, I do have the landscaper, but I go out. Actually, the guy was cutting the bushes yesterday at my house here in Florida, and I went out and talked to him and like made sure he was doing it the way I like, because I like an Italian. I love landscape. So that was my first kind of job. Then I was a caddy at the local country club that I never could belong on. I learned a lot of lessons being a caddy. I did not grow up in a country club, and some people were nice to me. Some people were like not nice to me. Like people were mean to me. I remember vividly one of these conversations. I was like 15 or 16, and the guy asked me what did I wanted to be when I go to college. I said, oh, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to go to like Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Princeton, one of the Ivies. And he kind of laughed at me, and I was like, why is this dude laughing at me? That wasn't very nice. And I ended up going to Columbia, and here I am. So it was one of the life lessons. And to this day, I'm unbelievably, just because I like them generally, but I'm really, really nice to caddies. And my nickname at the club is called BT for Big Tipper, because I always want to take care of, I always want to take care of caddies, because I remember how people used to look down on me when I was a caddy. But then my first real job was at, you're not American, so you won't get this, but it was an American New York institution called Carvel, which is an ice cream factory. It's not just a store, it's a factory. And you made everything there. And I started working there when I was 16, and I was really good at it, like really good. I made cakes. I made flying saucers. I loved it. I loved it. I made $3.35 an hour. I got a promotion. I ended up being the manager. I worked for this lovely Italian grandmother named, what was her name? Mrs. Munia. I never called her by her first, Mrs. Munia. She loved me. I made the cakes. They had a cake called a cookie puss, which they still make today. So you could be a little creative. The only thing I was really hard, I have terrible handwriting. And when you write on a cake, when you write like happy birthday, when you do it with the icing bag, your handwriting still sucks, even if you're using icing bags. So I was not good at that, but I love that job. The best part of that job, which was not good for my physique, was if you made a mistake, Mrs. Munia said, if you make a mistake, you can eat it. So I would like, if you fucked up a cone and did like vanilla instead of chocolate, you'd put it to the side and then eat it. So I gained like 20 pounds. But other than that, it was a great job.
And I love this. And going back to your caddying, you said you learned many life lessons. One is about how you treat people. What other lessons did you learn that have really
Well,
stood the test of time?
the other thing was really interesting, and I'm glad you asked that. So, like the way it works at country clubs is they have like a caddy yard, and they have like this generally disgusting building. Now it's nicer, where you sat in. And think of this: I was like a 15 or 16-year-old like white kid, and this was in Syosset. So the name of the club was called Woodcrest. It doesn't exist anymore. It was kind of a high-end club in Woodbury. I'd ride my bike there, but the other people, and there were a couple other kids there, but there were a lot of like adults that were caddies, and this was not like the higher end of society, if you will. So there I am as a 16-year-old, and guys were like throwing dice and drinking, and there were African Americans there and other minorities. I had never had interacted with these people before. So it was like you had to learn, one, how to interact with a large swath of society. And then the other
Yeah.
thing is that then you went on a golf course and you had like, rich people that I'd never really interacted with, that, from the area, that you had to like be an adult with and kind of interact with. And like, some of them didn't want you to talk, some of them would engage you, some of them were super nice. So I learned like a good life lesson on how to deal with people from like, the bottom of society up to like, the back then doctors were like the most prominent people, and there were some Wall Street people at this club. So these were like, other forms of humanity for me. I'd never met anybody, I grew up in a very kind of not blue collar, but a very like basic, family oriented place where nobody had like a ton of money like that. So it was like these people that had like monies and drove Mercedes and all that kind of stuff. So how do you like deal with, that large swath of society
Yeah, so
and
I suppose
people?
you learn how to deal with different people, and I
Yeah.
and you went like law was you mentioned you went to Columbia. What was it about law that interested you? What was the
Um, it was a little bit, I guess it's my personality. My mother said to me, and I've said this to people before, like when I was, young, and she was unbelievably supportive. So I could just like do what I want. No, I didn't run like wild, right? I was a great student and whatnot. So like, but she said, Dougie, she was calling me Dougie, you're either going to make a lot of money with that math or you're going to get in a lot of trouble. And both, kind of both have happened. And it was like I was always like very verbal and like, kind of almost had like ADHD talking to people and being like, having a personality. So I thought at first I thought, and I was a high school debater. I don't know if you have that in England, but we had like
yeah.
it's a kind of a big deal here. And I was pretty good. I was president of the debate team, kind of a geeky guy, right? I went to states and the nationals for it. I won some trophies. So I thought I was going to be like a courtroom lawyer, kind of like Clarence Darrow or something like that. And then when I got to law school, I was like, oh, these litigation people are just angry all the time and arguing about like nonsense. It was too much agita, too much stress, too much just being angry about nothing. And being a business lawyer or a corporate lawyer really, really like fit my skill set. It was like, intellectual, you had to be smart, you had to study, you had to like really know the law, you had to keep up with the case law, but you had to interact with like, high-end clients, private equity firms, big corporations, individuals, on sophisticated securities. I did everything in mergers and acquisitions, bankruptcy, intellectual property, tax, all that kind of stuff, and give advice. And then you had to go interact with, an adversary who was on the other side of the transaction, whatever it was, and get along well enough with them to be in, but come to a compromise that both parties could accept. Right. So it really kind of fit very nicely into what I thought I was good at.
And so what was the defining moment then when you were in law for a period of time that then was like, you know what, I'm going to leave, you co-founded Virtu.
Yeah, no, I never had any intention of leaving. I was very, well regarded at the firm. I won all these idiotic, awards that lawyers give to themselves, like super lawyers, and I was in all these books and, I was like private equity lawyer of the year and all this bullshit. Right? Like I was on the management committee of Paul Weiss, which is a great law firm. It's been in the news recently, but a great law firm. And I was a corporate lawyer making a good amount of money. But I had this client named Vinnie Viola that I had
Ah,
been referred to by General Atlantic Partners, which was my big client, Bill Ford, who
yeah.
I owe a lot of my life to Bill Ford. But so Vinny needed a lawyer. General Atlantic had invested in the New York Mercantile Exchange, and Vinny was chairman. So Vinny called up Bill Ford and said, "Hey, who was that? That loudmouth guy?" He didn't say, "Who was that guy that represented you? If he's good enough for you, he's probably good enough for me." And that's how I first met Vinny. And I was his lawyer for a couple 3 years. He had a couple very significant, like personal, business matters that I help resolve them for. And when you get into like the trenches with an individual client, like it means the world to them, right? It's not like I'm representing some big company and if they make or lose, $500 million, yeah, it matters, but it doesn't really matter. Like this was Vinny's life. And so I had a bet of, bet the company litigation, if you will, or situation for Vinny. And I did a really, really good job. Partly because I was a good lawyer, but partly because I was really into it. When you represent an individual and you really like the person, you're sort of super motivated. Like I'd make a lot more money doing some deal for some private equity firm as opposed to, representing Vinny. But, we really clicked on a personal level, both Italian Americans. We have very similar kind of views of life. We both like sports and this and that. We both have, family and, he's a West Point grad. I love military history. So we just had all these like, common interests. He's very different than me, but we really clicked on a personal level. And I'll say this: he must have seen something in me, and he said to me after like a couple of years of me being his lawyer at Paul Weiss, "Hey, Doug, you're wasting your effing time being a lawyer. You're really smart. I want to start this business in New York, and it's going to do." X, Y, and Z. And he described what Virtu was going to be and what it is today. Right. So I was like, it was one of those moments in life where I was like, and I'd never really thought about leaving Virtu. And we always like, I think lawyers are always like, look at their clients and say, man, I'm freaking smarter than this guy. I should be the guy making all this money and I should be the client. But you know, it's hard to like transition. And so I met a crazy man who was crazy enough to trust me. And here I am 17 years later in a really cheap trading vest with a nice view of the Cheesecake Factory talking to you. So life comes at
Uh,
you fast.
it does come at you fast. I didn't realize the Bill Ford connection because he very
Yeah.
kindly did the intro to my book. So
Yeah.
I met
Yeah.
him through
I saw that.
Lance.
Yeah.
Um,
I know. And he knows Lance really well. He invested in Lance's company. So yeah.
but I
Actually,
love what
I did that deal. I did that deal for GI.
did you? Okay, but I
Oh,
love
yeah.
what you said there with Vinny. You did a great job. There was like rapport. There was trust. You know,
Yeah.
there was consistency. There was, there was and Virtu. I'm again. How did you call it Virtu? Is it something Vinny had
Ah,
already decided on the name?
no, it's kind of a funny story. So like, Vinny's, you've met him a little bit. Like he's a very like kind of black and white, I'll say like a lot of his upbringing was informed by the United States Military Academy at West Point. So he's
Okay.
an Army Ranger at his core, right? Like disciplined. He's a little crazy, but he's disciplined and he learned all of his life lessons at the academy. And he would have been a great general. He kind of is a general, but he would have been a great, general in the United States Army. And I think, for personal reasons, he had to get out of the Army. But so everything was always informed by that. And when we were starting Virtu, I was still a lawyer. So I said, oh, hey, I can handle the organization I didn't know anything about trading. So I was acting as our lawyer and our president and our general counsel and our CFO. It was a startup. It was me and Vinny. So I was kind of doing everything. So I said, hey, Vin, what are we going to call this thing? He goes, I want to call it Virtu Financial. I said, why Virtu? He said, oh, because everything we do, we're going to be virtuous,
Ah,
right? There's no gray. It's black and white. We're always going to be on the good side of the white. Right. So everything we do, we're going to be virtuous. How we deal with our people, how we deal with the outside world, how we deal with regulators. And we tried to emulate that. And I said, oh, great. So I said VIRTUE, virtue, right? He said, no, I don't like the E. Take the E off at the end. I said, Vinny, I said, for the next however long, we're involved with this thing, everyone's going to say, what the fuck is virtue? Where did it come from? There's like a character in like some Machiavellian, I think in a Machiavellian book. I said, no one's going to understand. He goes, I don't care. I don't like the E at the end. I said, all right, you're the senior partner, whatever. No E. That's our relationship.
okay. So that's how virtue, and I love that virtuous piece because what a
Yeah.
strong word to underpin what
Yeah.
an incredible value. And you mentioned your transition from law into founding the business with Vinny. There are many people that want to take that leap of faith, but I think fear
Yeah.
can take hold. What advice, like if your daughter or your son were coming to 10 years in and saying, I'm thinking of making a change, Dad, but I've got job security, I've got reputational capital, like, what do I do? What advice would you give Rachel, for example?
I would say, look, you got to go with your gut, right? Sometimes, right? And it's hard to do. I was 42 years old. I had, what year was that? It was 2007. So I had a 6-year old and a 4-year old. I had a house and a mortgage, actually two houses. I had one in New Jersey and I had a small one here in Florida and two mortgages, right? I was making good money at Paul Weiss. I mean, he made it easy because he's a very generous guy, right? Like we shook hands on, and he said, "This is what I'll guarantee you this, and for the first year or two, blah blah blah." And in my heart, I said, "Okay, well, if this really blows up and it doesn't work out, I could always go back and be a lawyer because I'm a good lawyer." So I had that to fall back on. But it was just like it was the right time in my life. I had been a lawyer at that point for 18 years, and when you do something, and I loved being a lawyer, but the grind of being a lawyer at a big law firm it's hard to overstate what a grind it is. I mean, I worked a lot of hours. I built probably, I think like 2,700 hours or something like that. My last year at the firm, I had, and you're always like worrying about the next thing that you have to do. So you'd be working in a deal that closes, and like if you don't have another 10 deals lined up, you know, you're out of business, right? And so I was a partner, and I wanted to be successful. I was on the management committee, so it was a lot. So when the deals would come in, sometimes I'd be like, "Oh God, I got to find someone to work on this." And people were calling me on weekends. It's a lot. So there was that, and it was just and I want to say this in a way that doesn't sound incredibly egotistical and arrogant. I've been accused of that, particularly by my wife and my children. Is I did look at the universe and say, I'm pretty smart. I don't mind making decisions. I have I'll say balls. Can you say balls on this? I have
You can say
balls.
both, yeah.
I get along with people. Like, I don't know anything about financial markets, but I've always thought I could run something or at least be like in a, on the business side of things. And, a lot of my work as a lawyer, I had paid like window dressing to like, what the hell the client was really telling me. But at the end of the day, I was kind of making 99% of the decisions anyhow. I was just charging by the hour as opposed to being the principal. So I always thought, geez, I could do this. And I met the perfect partner for it, right? He was, I'll say, you know, uh, bold. I was going to say crazy, but bold enough to think that a smart, loudmouth, arrogant, big firm lawyer could transition from that to like starting. And we were literally like two guys in a garage. It wasn't a garage because it was the Waldorf Astoria because Vinny was a successful guy. But it was definitely like a change. And the hardest thing is like, when you have a job, and like every month or every quarter, whatever it is, or every 2 weeks, you get a paycheck and money comes this way. When you start a business and every 2 weeks you're paying rent, we weren't trading yet. When no money's coming in, money's just going out. And it wasn't like my wife was panicked. I had a lot, I was a good saver and whatnot, and Vinny was going to be fair to me, but it was definitely like a risk, if you will, but it was a calculated risk. So what I would say to people is like, always keep your eyes open. Um, Never be an asshole. If I had been an asshole in that transaction that Vinny was on the other side of the table, I'd be sitting at Paul Weiss selling hours still, and I wouldn't be talking to you. Um, and and have a voracious desire to learn things. I think he saw that within me. Like a lot of lawyers in particular like tend to get pigeonholed into like a particular like, oh, I'm a private equity M&A lawyer and I've done 20 different deals, right? And it gets sort of like, and you become a subject matter expert. Like I may not have been the best private equity lawyer, but I was a pretty damn good, really broad lawyer. I knew enough about tax and intellectual property and all this kind of stuff. And if I didn't know something, it would bother the crap out of me. So I would go read it and learn it and read cases and ask questions and try to like, recall as much of it as or remember as much of it as possible. So I think that has really um, done me well here in trying to like, start, grow, and run this business. So like if you have those kind, if you're, it's not just ambition, it's like desire to like better yourself and to learn more and to like be more and to just be broader in life, right? Like I
Yeah.
didn't, Vinny said to me, he said to me in 2008, you're going to be an industry leader in this thing. And he would say these things. Vinny has these like unbelievably like, broad statements he makes about things. And like, sometimes, I mean, to be honest, they go in one ear out the other. I'm like, this guy's just talking. But I remember him saying that. I'm thinking, there's no freaking chance. And he took me to see Terry Duffy at the CME. I was like, wow, this is Terry Duffy at the CME. And like, he took me to see Bob Greifeld at NASDAQ. Like, he knew all these people, Donnie Wilson in New York. And he's really nice. He kind of took me around. He basically said, I'm going to hold your hand for like a year. Then, you're off in the wild. And, I guess I am kind of an industry leader now. So it actually kind of worked.
And the word that struck me when you said about the balls is about courage, isn't it? Courage and belief. And that and to your point, it's calculated risk. It's not being reckless. It's like, you know what, if it doesn't work out, I can still go back. But there's that belief that it's gonna be okay.
Yeah, I think it's a belief in yourself. Like I always, like I was not the most politically correct guy at Paul Weiss, and which is, big law firms. I mean, and Paul Weiss is a pretty great firm, but like I didn't really like play the game because I didn't have to. Like I said to myself, okay, if I'm really good, if clients like me and the partners like me when I'm young, I'm going to get a lot of work, which I did. I'm going to get more work than I could imagine. And then clients are going to, then I'm going to make partner because they're going to see how good I am. And clients are going to like me and I'm good with people. I'm a good schmoozer. I'm good on a golf course. I'm not half bad in a pub. So like I'll get clients and I'll get work and I'll always have a business. Maybe you won't be, $100 million of legal fees. It might be 10 million or it could be 20 or whatever it is, but I'm going to always be successful as a lawyer because I have all those skills. So screw it. Who cares what people think about me? I don't have to like, you know, I'm not looking to be everybody's best friend. I'm looking to like, have great colleagues, collaborate with people and have a good, have a really good practice that I'm proud of. And so it was that kind of mentality when we started Virtu. I was like, okay, all right, I'm a talented guy. I'm gonna figure this shit out. I remember like I used to put on my wall of my first office in the temporary office, I'd have like little stickies on all the acronyms because people would say like EBS, E-Speed, they'd have like all of the months for crude would have different abbreviations, and I
Yeah.
didn't know any of this stuff. So I'd be in these you're the president of the firm, and people expect what the hell left from right is, and I didn't know. It's like learning a new language. You know what I mean? It's like I was literally like an immigrant dropped off a boat at Ellis Island, and I didn't speak English. I was speaking Swahili. So it was like I had to learn a whole new language.
But to your point, you were a voracious learner, and if you figured it out. If you don't know the answer, you go, as you said, I'd go where I'd listen to case studies.
Yeah.
It's that desire to want to grow.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I'm not. Again, it's the right way to say this is I'm not afraid to be embarrassed. So I would ask questions where it was very clear I didn't understand something, but I was smart enough and worked hard enough to have context around the question I was asking, if that made sense.
Yeah.
I didn't just go up to our technologist and say, "Oh, what's an operating system?" Right? Like I'd learned enough about it, and then I would go to our CTO, Aaron Simons, who sits a couple of doors down, in 2009, and I would ask him a question about like, oh, how does the PCI bus work? What's a kernel bypass? Like, what's an FPGA card? How does it really work? I think I understand it. How does this really work? And I'm sure he would roll his eyes sometimes, like, I cannot believe I work for this schmuck and doesn't know any of this. But he was a great teacher, and he would teach me a lot, and then I would like recall a lot of it, and I would grow, and then I would read a lot of the stuff that our technologists did. So like, for a guy who is, I don't know what I am, a baby boomer, whatever. I'm born in 1965, right? Like who missed like the computer age, if you will, in a material way. Like when I was in college and law school, I didn't have a laptop. When I did my law review note, I had to go to like a room, the computer room, and like type it out, right? It was like we didn't have laptops, right? So, and to this generation now, our technologists, it's like an appendage, and so it's a different language. So to be able to interact with them on a kind of a peer managerial, but a peer basis, that's been a struggle, but a struggle that I'm willing to undertake.
Yeah, and I love what you said there. It's and it's asking the question, providing context, and I suppose the key thing, if you're asking the same questions several times, then that's when it's
Yeah,
going to irritate people.
yeah,
And we referenced your daughter a minute ago, Rachel.
yeah,
I haven't met her. I've met your wife, Melissa, who's fabulous. But you in our fireside last year, you spoke about
yeah.
Rachel, who's a STEM graduate, or is a STEM graduate, working at a PE firm. And I was just curious because I've worked with a lot of your female leaders,
By the way, they're no longer called PE firms. They're alternative asset managers.
alternative asset managers.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah. They
okay,
do they do more than private equity. Anyhow.
and what have you learned from her around what it means to be a female in the financial services world today? Because things are shifting pretty
Yeah,
quickly.
things are really, really shifting. I mean, obviously, I'm incredibly proud of her. She's just almost like, and as is my son too. But like, she's always been like, she came out of she literally came out of Melissa and like was like ready to rock and roll. I mean, at age 2, she was like telling me what to do, and I was like, all right. I think at age 12, I gave up parenting because I was like, all right, she's smarter than me. She's got it all figured out. I remember a funny story when she was in high school, when she allowed me into her very, very messy room one time, and I see on the floor like a book like AP statistics. I'm like I call her dude. I'm like, dude, you're taking statistics? She's like, yeah, why? I said, because that like we do a lot of that at Virtu. So I start leafing through. I said, wow, this is really interesting. I said, I had no idea you were doing this. I said, what else are you taking? Like that was like our relationship. Like I wasn't like an absentee father. I think if you asked her, she would say, well, I'm a great dad and we have a great relationship. But like she was just so driven and so like, uber focused on getting on. She was just so results oriented. It's just shocking to me. I remember when I was her age, 17, 18, I didn't have my shit together nearly in the way that she did. Like she wanted to get herself into Yale. She did it 100% on her own. She took 16 AP tests, 16, and got fives on every one of them. Did it all on her
Wow.
own. Never had a tutor, never did any of that. She was just like, and she wanted to go work at this large alternative asset manager that starts with a K in Manhattan right out of college. And she got that job. So I do think the world has changed dramatically from when I was applying for a job or my wife was applying for a job. I mean, I kind of looked at law firms even back in 1990 when I was looking for a job. I'm an Italian American. I said, I don't want to go to like a real white shoe, waspy kind of firm because those people are so different than me. I didn't know anybody named Trey or had like, initials or, the third or the fourth behind their name. I wasn't a country club guy. So that's why I went to Paul Weiss, because I was like, it's it's an old schmata firm. They'll accept me for who I am. So the world's changed dramatically. I think the firm in particular she's at has a number of like, female role models, and within her group, there are a number of like, mentors and people that she works with. So it's much more egalitarian, if you will. And so I don't think that was ever really an issue for her. I think the world has changed pretty dramatically, and I've tried very much. And the story of why we started the Wintern program and why I was excited to meet you is because I looked at, we bought a couple legacy kind of Wall Street firms, and they were very, very, very much skewed towards males in terms of their population. And I was like, my daughter had just started at Yale, and I was like, well, wouldn't it be cool if we had like undergrad, like, freshman and sophomore young ladies that were STEM students that didn't quite know, or maybe would be intimidated by Wall Street or whatever it was, because it's definitely, the kind of frat boy bro trading culture. If we brought them in and gave them just like a taste of Wall Street, like, that would be good for them. And I'm doing a good thing for the universe, but also hopefully they'll come back as interns and then employees. And we have a number of them now that are employees. So she was my inspiration behind that. I always treated her and my son exactly the same, and I always encouraged her to go into business. And the cool thing now is that she works in private credit. And 100 years ago, when I was at Paul Weiss, I did a lot of private credit. I did a lot of structured credit. So now, like, I've gone from being the, obnoxious, overbearing, like, leave me alone dad, who she kind of acknowledged I had a good career, but was like, she was, I'm sure, proud of, but like I was embarrassing. Now we can talk about transactions and covenants and interest coverage ratios and how you calculate EBITDA, and like, and what, how you calculate SOFR and all this kind of stuff. And like some of the structured stuff she's doing is like, has got significant legal issues associated with it. And it's amazing the breadth of stuff that she knows already. It's really incredible. Like, and then I'll shut up. This isn't just about Rachel. It's about the I would say the maturity and breadth of understanding of some of the young people that I've interacted with through this Wintern program and even the intern program just astonishes me. It's maybe because they're a lot smarter than I am, and they grew up in households that encouraged it, as did mine. But I do think it's access to information and technology has enabled 17 to 22-year-olds or 23-year-olds that have a proclivity to wanting to learn this, to to just be so much more accelerated than I was. I mean, when I was a sophomore or junior in college, I was like, I worked in the parks department in New York inspecting hot dog carts. Like, I thought it was the greatest job in the world. I made $7 an hour. It didn't even occur to me to try to go work like at a financial services firm or anything. I didn't have a suit. Like I didn't know, as my father would say, I didn't know my ass from a hole in the ground. So it was like, you know, anyhow.
Look, and I work really closely with you and Virtu, and what I'd say about your internship programs and your winternship, is it wintership? I always get it pronounced.
Winternship, yeah.
Winternship. It gives those coming in such a platform to experience what it's like to be in the markets, because we can read everything conceptually in textbooks,
Yeah.
but actually nothing quite replaces the experience of it. And when you were speaking about Rachel, I think one of the the difference that makes a difference when you look at grads is a set of attitudes. And you talked about her drive. That is something that's within your control. And I think it's what are you bringing? And that I mean, I hope my children have that drive. That I think they're boys. They might need a bit more of
Yeah.
a different I was going to say a stick approach, but I'm not saying I'm going to, but bit of a like.
Yeah, they need, as my father would say, they need a kick in the ass. I mean, girls are a lot. I have one of each. I love my son dearly. He's working in Wall Street. He's a great kid. He's super smart. He's figured it out. He's super motivated. He's going to do great as well. He's a great golfer. And a really, really good baseball player. But like, he's need a little more motivation, primarily from his mother around like schoolwork and this and that. I mean, their default in life is like, video games, talking smack with their friends and like, eating bad food, right? Women, it's always funny like this. Even today, like, my wife will be with like friends and I'm like, what are you guys talking about? And like, oh, children, this and that. And then like, you go out on a golf course with a bunch of guys, what are you talking about? And you can imagine what we talk about, right? Either nothing or sports or just nonsense, like,
I remember the story you said last year when we talked about Rachel. You said she's a truth teller. Was it you were going to get rid of some of the snacks in the kitchen, and she said,
yeah,
don't be cheap, Dad."
yeah, no, she's like my, what do you call them? Gen Z. I don't know what that generation's even called now, like the 20 year olds. So like I bounce stuff off her all the time about like, things we do around the firm. So like I go, during COVID, like, we started having free lunches, because the people that came in and were, you couldn't go out, blah, 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 blah. So we had like 8 different types of like jerky, ostrich, beef, chicken, whatever it was, like 12 different kinds of sparkling water. So I was like, this is ridiculous, right? We're basically running like a deli at Virtu. So I said, she was working, interning at another firm in New York, and they provided nothing. So I was like, oh, and I asked Joe Maluso, what does all this cost us? I said, I'm going to give it. So I said to Rachel, what do you think? We got a barista, we got this, we got that. She's like, you can't get rid of it. We love snacks. We kids, you can't be cheap, Dad. I'm like, all right. So hence we have ostrich jerky.
But you know what? We all need truth tellers in our tribe. And
Yeah.
talking about our tribe, I've had the privilege of working with Virtue. You've got some extraordinary. I mean, I truly mean that. Really extraordinary people
Thank you.
working at the firm. What do you think are the characteristics or the attributes that kind of contribute to curating that winning team? What do you look for in your people?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, we don't have a type, right? So like, we're not looking for, I don't want to, I guess I'm a frat bro. We're not looking for like, frat bro, Ivy League, jocks that like know somebody and like, spend the summer on the Jersey Shore. We have plenty of those. We like them. They're good people, but like, you gotta like broaden the net, right? So we want, and there's a certain amount of obviously like just kind of raw competence, i.e. intellect that you have to have. You have to have a personality where you can be collegial and you're as worried about like the whole as you are about yourself, and you have to be really a self-starter. It's not like it's not a warm place, but it's not like a coddling place where you're going to have like a manager or a project manager that's going to sit on top of you and tell you have to do this, that, or the other thing. We just don't have the infrastructure intentionally for that. So this is not like, I'm sure not that I've ever worked at Google or Facebook or one of those or Uber, one of these technology places where, there's like developers and then there's like, senior developers and there's like a project manager and you have a team and you have very, concrete this and then, blah, 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 blah. It's much more fluid than that, right? I mean, certainly within, we have training and whatnot. Certainly there's organization, but if you're not like a person that will enjoy that kind of environment, right? You're going to have a hard time. And so we want people that have that kind of personality. And then the last thing I would say is, and everybody says this, but when we first started Virtu, literally probably through like 2017, so for the first 10 years, I interviewed everybody because there's nothing worse than an asshole in an office. Like there's nothing, I have a rule. Like if I meet people, even if they've been here a while, and I really like when they're walking towards my office or I see them and I want to like duck and go the other way, they can't stay at the firm. Because if I'm feeling that, then other people are feeling that. And so it's not
Yeah.
like calling them assholes is probably the wrong thing. They just don't fit in, right? Like maybe they're too self-centered. Maybe they're annoyed because they want to be at like a payout firm. And if, their desk made $12 million, they should make $4 million, that kind of crap that goes on at hedge funds and other places. Like that's just not Virtu. It's not what we're all about. So, squeaky wheels get way too much oil. And so
Mhm.
my management philosophy is always just make the hard decision and move on. I've never regretted a single decision I've made. I don't regret any decisions, but particularly like personnel decisions. You'll survive. You'll survive. When
Yeah.
people come to us and say, I got an offer from so and so and I'm leaving and they're paying me 40% more, 50% more. You know what I say to them? I say, God bless you. That's a great decision you've made, and I wish you and your family nothing but the best. I
Mm.
never bid against people because I'm like, you know what? Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, in the rare case, if I think we've made a mistake and we've undervalued somebody, I would do it. But that's happened, less than the fingers on one of my hands in the last 17 years.
But I think the a-hole, or I call them the jerk geniuses, because often they're super smart, but they're just
Yeah.
cancerous. Again, they're cancerous, and it's kind of, you've got
Yeah.
to take the cancer out. And how do you? What is your barometer for, like, when you said you used to interview anyone, not
Yeah.
anyone, everyone, like, how would you detect? Like, what would be? Is it a question? Is it a feeling? Is it your gut?
Yeah. Yeah, I would always like when I do interviews, because probably because I'm not generally not as smart as the person that I'm interviewing, and certainly not as technical. It would just be a conversation like you and I are having, and you can tell when people respond to things, and you ask them questions. If it's always like I, me, as opposed to like, oh, I was on a great team in high school and we won the state championship. It's like, or this or that other thing. Um, I don't know. I guess I have a pretty good, to the extent I have a skill set, as I've said, it's knowing people and kind of knowing their backgrounds and kind of learning a little bit about them and kind of seeing what motivates them, you know? Like I want super talented people that like want to be accomplish something and want to stand out, but I would love, I remember interviewing, folks that were like on a math team or like a physics team or did like a science project, and they would be like, "Oh, I was with this great group and I had a wonderful like advisor and we did this, that, or the other thing. We submitted this paper and it got published." Like that's the kind of person you want, as opposed to like, "Oh, I won three." I remember we used to be obsessed with like the math. There's a math Olympiad. I don't know if you're aware of this.
No.
Yeah, and so all the geeks love this, and you can Google and see, and like people will be like, "Oh my God, this guy won, two golds." When he was like, 19 years old. Like, there's some, person I think who's won like three gold medals. They're like the smartest math person of all time. But at the end of the day, they may not be assholes, but they're just not able to like communicate and be practical about what they are. So, the best employees we've had here are like, super smart for sure, like in like a general way, and we definitely test for that. But in terms of like problem solving and dealing with issues, they'll do it like in a collaborative way, right? And they're more than happy to they're not just saying it's my way, the highway. We've had some really, really talented people here that have like kind of, you know, had friction in terms of like priorities, in terms of this, in terms of that. Like if you can't like articulate why you think what a priority over something else to people at Virtu, then in my view, it's you, not them.
Yeah.
Right. Like I know enough of the senior people here, and people have been here for years and years and years. Like, yeah, we all have egos, but no one is going to like, say no to something out of, because it wasn't their idea,
So
right? Or it
that
wasn't
really,
their project. So I think that's what makes us really, really strong. Part of what
and
it does.
it really comes up for me then that, people's, the way of being has to be kind of simpatico with the values of the organization. That
Yeah.
congruency piece is really important. And one of the things that I think I really wanted to touch on today is, when we look at the world around us, change is is, I think we can all agree, change is constant, but the pace of change is pretty unprecedented. Whether that's the political environment, climate change, uh, but yeah, changes around us. And you've led, organizations over the last few decades. And I was curious, how do you lead in those volatile times?
Yeah. I mean, I think I've always been consistent in the way that I approach things, right? Like I can be volatile. I mean, I inherited from my dad, as I tell people, like a bad hip and like a temper, right? So like I definitely have, and I've gotten better as I've gotten older, right? But I can definitely be volatile. But I've been consistent about my approach to leading and growing this firm, right? This is not like we're a public company now, and even like quarter to quarter, I don't sit there and like, get panicked about a quarter or a day or a week. Vinny and I built this firm for the long term to do, to try to be the best bid and the best offer, and to be able to, as he said, we just want to feed our families. And our families have grown, right? We have 1,000 employees now and public shareholders and things like that. But the original thought behind this firm was like, hey, if Vinny and his then three, and now he's got 9 grandchildren, if his family are comfortable, and me and my what two kids are comfortable, then we've satisfied ourselves, and that was a very simple kind of ambition. So like, don't do anything expedient. Don't take risk. Don't go out of your comfort zone and like hire people that might make money in the short term but would ruin the culture. Don't go into products and services that aren't consistent with kind of what our central mission about being a market maker, right? We've made two material acquisitions, and they were both very, well thought through, excuse me, and highly strategic in terms of growing our strategic remit, but certainly consistent with our core philosophy, right? So I think what ends up happening with a lot of CEOs, particularly a lot of public company CEOs, because they have pressure on them to perform and grow, and they worry about stock prices and all this kind of stuff. They do things that are just like not core or fundamental to the firm, and do things that are that don't make a lot of sense, frankly. And so, like, I think if there's a benefit to there's many benefits to our partnership and to Vinny being our controlling shareholder. It's enabled me as the day-to-day leader to be much more measured and consistent about what we do. We've had great quarters, we've had great days, we've had down quarters and down years. I'm not sitting here worried about my job. I'm not worried about how much money I make. I don't worry about the stock price, right? I worry about, all right, are we a little more excellent today than we were the day before? Do I feel good about the firm? Is the zeitgeist of the firm, the morale of the firm good? Are people happy? And, are my people that I'm close to around me that I directly interact with, are they doing their jobs? Is their morale got high? And are they moving the firm forward? If so, that's great. The universe is going to give us a lot some days, and it's going to give us nothing some days, right? And you have to like go with the flow.
And you said there, stick to the central mission, like don't be part of the contagion. To your
Yeah,
point, you know the vision, you know the mission, and and don't be emotional led.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of like the firm we bought, Knight Capital, in 2017 was a perfect example. They had a great core business around wholesale retail market making, right? But and then I mean, I wasn't here then, but like they bought like a reverse mortgage business. They bought like an old school fixed income desk up in Greenwich. I mean, they bought all this stuff that didn't make any real sense to the core mission. It was frankly, it was just a distraction. And so every time you do that, you're just chipping away at the excellence of like what the core business is. And that by definition is going to degrade. You're going to take your eye off the ball of that core mission. And that's exactly what happened. Like, Citadel Securities came in as a competitor. They started, price the pricing of wholesaling in terms of price improvement became more acute. And frankly, Knight just couldn't survive in that format. It didn't stick to its knitting about what it was, and it grew in a very haphazard and non-virtuous kind of way.
I love that. And look, you said, well, I don't want to ask your age, but 60,
59,
50,
59.
59. I thought you'd had your 60th, sorry, recently.
No,
So 59. Okay. So when are you 60?
June.
What are you going to be doing to celebrate?
I'm going to Europe with the wife and kids. I found this great spot. I'm not going to say where because I do have some haters in the world. But I have to satisfy a daughter who doesn't play golf and likes a high-end resort and loves to go to an amazing pool and eat great food late at night, and a son who hates all that crap and wants to play a world-class golf course. So there's about three of those in the world, and I found one.
But surely this should be about you. It's your birthday. You get to set the rules.
You know what? My wife and some of my friends have asked me that, and you know what I say to them, and this is going to sound really like trite and like I don't really mean it, but I mean it. Like every day's my birthday. I live
Yeah.
with, I'm very very happy with where my life's at. I can do anything I want. I can kind of buy anything that I want. I don't really want anything, as you can tell. I'm not really a sartorial person. You know, I won the Stanley Cup last year with the Florida Panthers. My name's on the Stanley Cup. I mean, it's like, what else?
Life is good.
Life's good. So like, I thought about for my 50th, my wife was great. We rented I'm a huge fan of the band Queen. I know every Queen song
Yes.
backwards and forwards. And so I rented a performance space in New York called City Winery or something like that. And we had the greatest, I'm not going to call them a cover band because they're a tribute band called Almost Queen. This is one of the highlights of my life. So I had a couple hundred of my best friends there, and Almost Queen came, and they were so cool. We paid them, obviously. They let me do the set list. So it was every Queen song I liked in a specific order. So,
What's your favorite Queen song? Do you have a favorite?
the answer is like, you can't ask me which is my favorite child, right?
Okay.
So there you go. I would say like, I mean, I like all the big hits like Bohemian Rhapsody, We Will Rock You, Don't Stop Me Now, We Are the Champions. Obviously I love everything out of that, but I like, there's a song called Now I'm Here, which was on the Sheer Heart Attack album. I'm a big Brian May
Okay.
fan. Yeah, one of my life goals, which I have not accomplished yet, is I want to meet Brian May. I understand the closest I've come to him is I met a guy who serviced his fish tanks at his house in Notting Hill. So when I go to London, I always try to eat like in Notting Hill on the hopes that, and I always look around like looking for a shaggy gray hair. Um,
But visualize it, manifest it. And last question, if you were to go back and give your younger, the younger Doug Cifu some pearls of wisdom, what would you tell him?
well, the answer I've been giving to everybody, because I just had an operation on my hip, is take care of your hip flexors and stay flexible. Because I did not, I had genetically bad flexibility. My dad had his hip replaced, and I sort of ignored it. I exercised a lot, I worked out a lot, and I have had a real problem with my right hip recently, but I got it all fixed. So like, you get overwhelmed. I say this to my daughter, because she's now working, right? And they work a lot. And I'm really, really proud of her because she listened to me and she goes to do one of these like Pilates kind of things. I never, solid core. I don't know what the hell it's called, but and she looks great. Like she's in great shape. She, whatever. Yeah, she's doing it and she loves it. She does it like 5, 6 times a week. So I'm probably like of the things I've influenced, I hope I had some influence on my children. That's probably at the top of the list. Because I said to her, I said, listen, dude, you're going to work your tush off. Like you're going to be there from 8 to 8. You're going to like eat 3 meals there. You're going to take the Uber home. You're going to like do conference calls all the time. She's an investment professional. That's what I used to do it. You get caught up in that and you use it as an excuse to let like your physical side, not keep up with your intellectual, your work side. I did that for a long time. And it's hard to like undo that, and to try to catch up, which I'm trying to do now. So that's the best advice I could give to young people, which is like you'll be able to work. There's always time for the term sheet. There's always time for the conference call. There's not always time for your health.
Yeah. And the body does keep the score.
The body keeps the score. It does.
Well, look, thank you. I have laughed through this, as well as, there's so many serious points on the leadership lessons. You just bring such joy, effervescence, and incredible energy to all the conversation we've had. And I'm excited for people to be able to listen to your lessons because I know the impact it's going to have. So thank you.
Well, I thank you very much. I greatly appreciate everything you've done for the firm because I've got nothing but great feedback from my colleagues, and so you've positively influenced a lot of great people at Virtu, and that means a lot to me. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Doug.